Hi, Andrew. Thanks for taking the time at GTM Expertise. Welcome.
Hi, Ben. Pleased to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
Excellent. No problem at all. Look, it's great to have you on. One of the topics we're going to attack today is around mentoring your way through go-to-market. And I think that's something that we probably share, and no doubt loads of experienced folks on who are watching this would share in the way they can look back at their career and think about the mentors that have helped them. In that regard, before we get into that, it would be good to understand what your career has looked like and what you're doing today and where you're up to. That'd be super.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Well, if I start from the end and then work backwards, because that's definitely an obsession of mine. So currently, my company, I help small to medium-sized founder-led software companies improve their sales and marketing performance. I do it in a no BS way, and my area of specialty is industries that handle large amounts of data. So that might be media and entertainment, it might be life sciences and research. Basically, when you're dealing with large amounts of unstructured data, I became slightly obsessed with this concept of sort of three-dimensional data pipelines. So you have your traditional storage, which is in one plane. And so it might be really fast storage for data processing and then really slow storage somewhere in the cloud for long-term archive. But actually, that's only one dimension of the way businesses work. You have the second vector, which is like data pipelines. So think you're shooting a movie, you get your raw camera footage and it gradually gets transformed through this data pipeline to something that you click a button, watch on Netflix. That data pipeline is the transformation, maybe additive, maybe sort of reductive, subtractive to that data pipeline. But then the third vector, which is the way that we affect the data, is the users and the applications. So we kind of, we slice and dice data as it goes through these three dimensions. So I work with storage vendors. I work with data pipeline vendors like workflow specialists. But ultimately, I see the world in this kind of three-dimensional picture with the way unstructured data flows through. And honestly, it's not a hugely glamorous bit of software or tech to be involved in. But it is at the same time, because you end up behind the scenes in these really cool projects. You end up under NDAs and you're working on stuff. And years later, you watch something on TV, you go, yep, I was there early doors. So I call it the least glamorous end of the media and entertainment industry.
That's great. That's amazing. I really think that would be a fun area to spend time in. But like, if you cast your mind back to when you started, where you've got to today, I don't know, because we've talked a little about this before. You've used mentors in a way to get to, to help you get to where you are in your career, I guess. And so, was there a point when you started out where you thought, oh, I need to go and get a mentor, or was that more like you naturally gravitated to someone who you started working with and started absorbing? Like, how did that process go? I'm quite curious.
Well, I think if you asked me versus asking my wife, you get, a very different story. My wife calls them my father figures, but I would say innately I'm drawn towards people who I can learn from. Like I never wanted to be the top of the class in school, and I'd sort of get bored if I know more than anyone else in the room without sounding too arrogant. So I'm drawn to people who have more to say, who are knocking it out the park more than me. So maybe that's something innate in me, but if I then look back at how I got to where I got, then I could definitely track my journey through my mentors from literally the very point at the end of my 3-year sort of university education where I walked into the right place at the right time and had a conversation where someone said, "Hey, you should go talk to this person." And so it's like, what is it? You make your own luck, but I can definitely see the positives in all of those happy little accidents that sort of nudge you along. And then it's, you get a couple of decades into your career, and I never want to say I had the answer from the beginning. I actually want to say I'm retrospectively going, oh look, this is my through line. And if you don't credit people along the way, then I think it doesn't make you a better person. Crikey, I'm getting all the, what is it, Chris Williamson. That was my plan.
No, but I think you're right. Like, and if I think back to when I started as well, I guess when you come out with all that energy at that age, you kind of want to work on the big stuff and the cool stuff, and you're focusing on where the industry's maybe heading as well, because there's a in the industry I worked in, similar to you, like there is a legacy, and so you're looking at the kind of the future stuff. But what I appreciated at that time was someone just going, you'll get to that, but first let's just give you the real fundamentals and basics about this industry, because it's really important that you understand the history of where it's come from, because that'll help you as you go through, because it'll make sense when decisions are made and why everyone's obsessing about a certain standard, or why everyone's obsessing about a certain way of working, because it has some level of nature to it. And so I reflected certainly on that. Was a really great. They just said, let's get really back to basics. And for me, it was like, you will end up in the sort of at that time sort of IT end of this industry, but at the moment, let's just get you wiring up everything to understand how it all works. And I valued that mentorship greatly, because at the time I didn't think that was what was good for me. And it's not something you want to go and explain to your friends. You want to explain that you're going in this direction or this direction, and actually what you're doing is you get brought to the very basics. But it gave me the absolute best grounding, and that's part of mentorship too, I guess, isn't it? Is directing
Well,
you where you should be spending your time, what you think you should be spending your time.
100%. And I like to sort of mix my past experience with my future experience and almost, pay it forward. Like I was talking about a guy I hired who's since become a good friend, but I hired him into an apprenticeship program. And he was incredible. All of his friends went to university. He got a job in IT. He could write Python code. He could write this. He could make websites. He could do data analytics. But so there was all that kind of shiny tech potential. I
Yeah.
taught him the boring stuff, the soft stuff. Like I taught
Mhm.
him to keep his mouth closed into meetings, because he was like a puppy dog. But the problem is you can't put a puppy dog into a boardroom and have it wag its tail without someone going, look, just go off and make some tea. And it's almost, maybe it's a generational thing, or maybe I'm just turning into a grumpy old man. Like knowing how to make the right cup of tea for the right people and having to slum it for 3 months. Well, you've not quite got the color right. It's got to be terracotta, and you've got to do 1.5 spoons of sugar, and it's all the kind of old school, tea boy metaphors that, yeah, definitely you've kind of got to rack up those miles, and then every now and then you sort of have this mundane day to day, and then you just get these blips, and you go, hold on a second, that was it, and you have to be in it to be able to catch it, and
Mm.
effectively, like this conversation, I mapped through those little peaks that I grabbed with both hands, and they've given me that full sweep of, this is the way I see the world and the way my clients like
Mm.
me to see the world.
I think the interesting part as well, what you said earlier, was when someone said to you, you should go and talk to this person. That person's really important as well in the mentor kind of field, right? Because a mentorship is seen as sort of the mentee and the mentor, right? But it's never the person who actually introduced you, or person who sort of said, that's the person that I've identified that you need to go and talk to. It's actually really, really key too, right? Like, and I think we should all thank that person as well, that they were able to spot both the where the gaps are, and spot someone who could fill those gaps that wasn't themselves. I think that's quite key. And I can remember a few people were telling me exactly that, like, in those words, very quickly, like, before you do anything, go and speak to that person, right? Has that resonated with you? Is that something that you can recall more of in as you step through your career?
Yeah, definitely. It's one of those, like, people form opinions of you, and this potentially applies to product and brand as well. But people form that opinion really, really quickly, and so then you're either reinforcing that positive opinion by sort of topping it up with trust and delivery of that trust, or you then don't meet the expectations, and then you sort of fall down in those estimations. I think the sort of the first big mentor that I love to share the story, but it's one of those, again, you realize in retrospect. So I found out the reason I got hired was I was keen. I seemed to know just enough to get the job done, but I was bright-eyed and willing to learn, and I was cheap because everyone
Right.
else they were talking to. So like, let's look at the sort of spreadsheet of criteria. But this person saw in me just enough that they kept topping me up with, prove yourself. Okay, we've earned a bit of prove yourself. And then there was this amazing moment where I'd been an employee in an enterprise for long enough, and I won some HR award. And they said you get a certain amount of money towards some training. Now I was going down the engineering track, so this is in the days of, you know, everyone cool had a Cisco CCNA or a VMware
Yes.
qualification or ITIL.
Yeah.
And like that was the track I was going to go, and I was going to be a chief security officer for a bank, and it was all laid out, and I was going to make bank, and it was going to be fantastic. And this mentor just turned around to me and said, "You can have any training you want, but if you try and push through anything in your area of working, anything technology, I will decline it." And he literally turned around to me and said, "Have cookery lessons if you want." And then I was like
Right.
a little bit taken aback. I was like, but hold on a second, I've got this plan to become like the king nerd. And he just pushed like a little piece of paper across the table, and it was finance for non-financial people. And he said, "I think this is the one you should go for." I
Right.
went
Interesting.
on a 2-day training course, you know, coffee, sandwiches, learnt about finance, balance sheets, OPEX, CAPEX. That was one of those kind of third person nudges where all of a sudden, like within weeks, I'm working with the CFO for the organization. We're talking about hedging currencies. I'm helping them out with their Oracle databases. I had no database experience up to that point, but because I had that basic finance understanding, that then led me on to, you know, a world of sales, a world of conceptualizing pipelines, customer behavior, and all that sort of stuff. And it came from that. I attribute it to that one conversation where he literally said, "Have cookery lessons if you want."
Right. Right. That's such great advice to. It's kind of obvious to think that if you're in the sort of sector that you're in, that you just keep getting better and better at that particular vertical, but without sort of those, to use the cookery analogy, these ingredients sort of dropped in, mixed in as you go along from completely different parts of the organization, brings you into a much more valuable and well-rounded and probably adaptable person, which I would argue today, no one could have foreseen that, when you started your career, that today we're in a position where sort of high specialty areas are getting sort of gobbled up by certain AI capabilities potentially, and the fact that you can have a broader and deep set of skills at the same time is really valuable. And I think that's just great to hear that you've been able to use that in your career as you go forward. But what did you feel like at the time when they said, turn left instead of right? Like, how did that feel to you?
I think there's what's the phrase? It's pattern breaking. What is it? I think it's pattern interruption. So I had a plan and I was ready to go down, and I was going to graft. I was going to do my 40 hours a week. I was going to study in the
Yep.
evenings.
Yep.
And then this outside sort of force just pattern interrupted. And he didn't make me any promises. You know, there was no like, you'll add another zero to your salary. It was just a pattern interruption that made me think, hold on a second, let's just go here. And I guess, what is it? I'm slightly obsessed with Alex Hormozy and the way, like, he's a modern day philosopher. And you know, that was a period of my life where I sort of had nothing to lose. Like, I was able to go wide in my knowledge, knowing that, well, I didn't know at the time, but in retrospect, knowing I kind of had 10 years to play. Like, I'll try a bit of this, a bit of that. Like you say, I'll be the T-boy. I'll do the wiring on this thing. I'll go on a finance course. And so I kind of
Yeah.
cast the net wide. I started to have enough data points to draw it in and go, hold on a second, this is what I'm good at. This is where people trust me on. And then you said it a second ago, this is where I can deliver value. And most importantly, the flip side to that, this is what people value when I'm involved.
Right.
Because I think that value that, you know, I can sell at you, or I can let you sell me to yourself. And again, that then moves on to later on in my career where I really like clocked up some air miles when it came to, you know, selling and productizing and all that sort of stuff.
Because it's you said it right there. I think that it's very difficult to understand quite the value you add to someone else or some situation or some business. Because in your mind, you're adding value with the things you're good at, I guess. It's probably natural to think that, right? But whereas a mentor, in this case, this mentor sort of interjecting and said, yeah, push that bit aside, push that bit aside. That's the bit that I think and let's draw that forward. Buffered by the fact that you still have this like good technical based understanding that helps you in sales and marketing, which is definitely a more unique skill set to be able to have both sides of the fence, if you like. But that's all always struck me as interesting when you get that mirror back to you and you go, actually, I didn't think I was actually very good at providing value there, but you're telling me I am, and so therefore I probably should listen to that, right? Because you can be very bullish about what you're doing, what you're good at, and end up not really telling anyone anything. So did that play out later in your career then? Like what else came to fruition as you've done?
Yeah, certainly. So yeah, so kind of going plotting my wife through my various work dads. So there was the sort of my next kind of big hitting mentor was definitely that the next person made me read between the lines, almost in a slightly ruthless way. It's like, okay, so imagine you're the custodian of a company's money. And this would I'd be on the opposite side of this table. So we're responsible for paying everyone's salaries. We're also responsible for delivering the service to your client. Okay, so now you've come in, Mr. Head of IT, or technology change person. You want a big number from me. How is that going to affect those people on the left, those people on the right? Let's draw that kind of full picture. And sometimes you have to sort of challenge the status quo. Sometimes you have to really obsess about the P&L because we're in it for the long haul. So how do we make sure that a decision I make is not going to have to be backed out of in 9 months' time?
Mm.
So it was the beginnings of that. The first mentor, it was about me, make me as good as I can be for the real world. The next one is like zoom out and just going, it's not actually about you, mate. It's about us. It's about them. And I feel like I kind of came full circle. I heard someone say recently that marketing and sales, it's not about what you're selling to them. It's about what they want. And that in itself, that's another cheat code, which then
Yeah.
leads into, we could go down a rabbit hole here, but I'll pause for a second.
Yeah, no, I agree because that whole learning for me, I had the same learning, right? It's quite obvious a path to take as a human, I think, when you're involved either in pre-sales or sales to talk greatly about what because you know it so well and you talk greatly about what you're doing, and just for someone to say actually no one really cares that much about that, apart from the very small bit that you're talking about, where I can relate to the bit that solves my problems, right? And I when I started my career, I was a customer, I guess, and so I didn't realize that until perhaps quite a lot later in my career when I was in the sort of commercial side, when I reflected back on it and going, oh yeah, that's what they were trying to do when they were, asking about what, and I was saying, what cool tech have you got to show me? And they're going, well, let's just leave that a minute. What are the problems you're trying to, solve? And the good ones that did do that ended up being successful, right? But it took me a while to connect those dots. And so, yeah, I'm sure everyone goes through that. There's still plenty that haven't gone through that and may never go through that change, but that's a really
Yeah,
key part to a sort of transition from tech to sales from a mental perspective.
definitely. Like I think I actually started to use it in my in my pre-sales sort of approach. There's almost there's the gold taps. So sell me the nicest bathroom that you've ever seen, even with the gold taps, or there's the kind of do nothing approach. And being privileged to work in the media industry, but like I said, in the less glamorous end of the spectrum, like when you're working in a media operation, there is always an option, even in this kind of AI driven world, where you can take a bright eyed graduate from a media course and put them in a dark room and pay them a salary barely above the minimum wage because they'll take it because they want to rack up those miles. Because I don't want to contradict myself, but you've got to clock up some miles. But they are often, in terms of monthly recurring cost, less than some AI SaaS solutions. So just throw humans at the situation. So now all of a sudden, as a technology leader, I want to walk into a CEO and go, right, okay, I've got a plan. It's going to be a couple of million. Like, if they don't say to me, well, we could just throw, half a dozen graduates and a manager at that, and then do it, particularly when you're, in my specialty where you're dealing with large amounts of data, where there's a lot of copying, there's a lot of
Right.
packaging it up in a secure way, move it along. That's a conveyor belt. It's almost a fulfillment center for data. Like, why
Yeah.
not test the do nothing approach of like just put in some, a cheap tech stack and some humans,
Hmm.
because you can leverage that, and then you throw in, global geographies where you can have follow the sun productivity like that. And yes, I promote efficiency and all that sort of stuff, but at the same time, you've got to test yourself, and then that testing yourself is, for me, that closes the loop on. It's not about me and what I find cool. It's about what gets the job done.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And those people who elevate that situation a bit and sort of take it to help you see through what you're doing, because you can get very, I mean, especially in sales and commercial sales in B2B enterprise environments, which is what we're talking about, and exactly what we focus on. A GTM expertise is smaller, but certainly smaller to scaled companies that are very technical, trying to make inroads into very large enterprises. You've got to show decent value there, and I think you have to go through that journey like you just mentioned, in terms of that concept of what could someone just saying to you in enterprise sales motion, tapping you on the shoulder and saying, the other alternative is not the competition but just doing nothing, really like it suddenly gives you a completely different lens on the whole situation, because you can be very, especially these big deals that you can't run many of these in parallel as a smaller organization. And at some point, you look at this go no go situation where you're really like, okay, we're going to go for this one. Everyone sort of puts in an enormous amount of time. If it's tender driven in the enterprise world, it's even more to work on, more pay. But then someone just says, like the result of this is that they could just do nothing as another option. Is just a really not like great way to frame the entire situation, and helps you become, I guess, a bit more consultative and vulnerable in that sales process, which I think is, and more human, which is probably
It's it,
probably a good
it's
thing.
funny. You said consultative and vulnerable. I was going to say battle weary,
Mm.
but yeah, it's and but then it heightens what I call your spidey sense. You can get a feel for it, so you don't enthusiastically load up a sales pipeline and go, right, this is the biggest funnel. It's wide, it's deep, it's, we're going to
Yeah,
retire off this one. It's you
yeah,
become better at qualifying it. It's funny you said about the B2B-ness, and I think very much more recently, and this goes to sort of mentor number three in my journey. I feel like I've missed a mentor as well. It's the contradiction that when you're in B2B sales, like, where you can succeed better is solutions solve problems, not products. And that's directly taken from, you know, one of my mentors and very good friends. I was on the phone to him this morning. But the nature of B2B, like you said, they've got all these kind of quite heavy processes. You've got the tender process, you've got due diligence, you've got all this sort of stuff. But you kind of throw in the mix, we're in the new world where like the decision makers and the influencers and, everyone who's consulted in that racy sort of decision making matrix, actually we're all just real people, we're consuming stuff. And so it's helped shift my frame, and I guess I'm privileged to work in old world where you had to put on a suit and sit in someone's reception and go like wait an hour for a meeting, and then okay, do a pitch, there's the whiteboard, now go home and wait. In this new world, people are they're buying into the stories much better, but then that's also forcing the sellers and the solutionizers and the product packagers to try and do it. And what I'm enjoying right now, because no one's nailed it, is how badly everyone's doing it, particularly B2B. Like sometimes it's really base, you scroll through LinkedIn, hey, a laptop manufacturer has hired a pretty girl to drink coffee in a park, so you buy their cloud solution. Well, yeah, kind of saw that one coming. Or you kind of go, like, you read this like meandering AI copy, and you're like, oh. So the ability to try and get it right. No one's cracked it really, but it's that concept of the two inputs of this. It's about the solution. It's not about the product, and it's the people buy the story. So you're gradually like, I think someone calls it the messy middle in marketing, whereas there is no
yep,
straight line through like that
definitely
first
not.
touch to a sale nowadays. It's a messy middle. You need, what's the Google statistic? You need like 3 to 11 touches across two platforms, and the recipe, the ingredients are very different. But if you get to the other side, you've kind of pre-qualified, you've built that additional confidence on the buyer side that by the time they pick up the phone, they go, well, they've sort of made their decision. I do it to myself. I see something on Airbnb and I've already gone on holiday to it even before the dates are available.
Right, right. Yeah, no, well, the simply the amount of information that's available to folks at their fingertips before you even have that first call makes a huge difference. In some ways, helpful. You're not going in and saying, by the way, there's this whole new category of technology that you might never have heard of, which could have been, the case in the early days when you're making those sort of front leading innovative solutions that are right at the front of the curve. Now it's, well, they've got all of that information at hand. It's a case of who's going to cut through the best story. And that certainly resonates for me, especially when it comes to, you mentioned this messy middle and how many into that phase of the sales process where you're probably more at a repeatable clip in terms of the way that you go through a sales cycle. If I reflect to some of the startups we work with and some of the startups will be watching this, where they're just emerging out of founder-led sales, where founder-led sales can take a much more, possibly a lot more linear path actually than the sort of more mature sales, which are many more touch points, etc. They're taking a leap as early adopters with their founder-led sales, and that's just a different process. But coming out of that into what you mentioned there, that's the area we like to focus on a lot, because that's difficult, right? To go from that to a more structured pipeline, to a more structured sales process. Where in your career have you seen that kind of transition, or not necessarily from founder-led sales, just a step change in transition from an unstructured to a more structured sales process? Just because we're on that topic now, I think it's really interesting to dive into. Do you have any sort of references there you can share?
I've got tons of stuff. I think actually, if I could wind this recording back, that basically is my. So all of my
Right.
clients at the moment they're founder led. Where there's a technology founder and there's a commercial founder, and so one's banging the streets, pounding the streets, rattling the telephones, and the technology sort of founder is kind of backfilling the tech to deliver.
Yes.
It's trying to find, and often it can only come through like shadowing and opening your eyes and just really paying attention to all the nuance. How do you turn the magic that the founders had into something that can be leveraged? And sometimes it's acknowledging that those big 6-7 figure deals need to be left to the founders to start with. Like, let's look at the cookie cutter, let's look at the Lego brick components and go, okay, so if I'm going to save you 20% of your day by removing the mundane stuff. So I'm going to componentize, and this is where solutionizing the products is kind of thing one, and that's what founders are really good at. And then productizing the solution is then
Right.
enabling the founders to free up their time, gain leverage by productizing those solutions into the Lego bricks, into the building blocks that you can then hand over to, trusted sort of secondary sellers, if you will, additional core members. But again, as long as there's a flow of trust, as long as the people you're handing those Lego bricks over know how to build the rocket ship or the race car, happy days. If the founder has to get stuck in again, then the process is broken. And I've literally that's what I very much do day to day. It's the goal: earn trust as quickly as possible, and then kind of solutionize or just document the hell out of it. And sometimes it's a case of, if you can turn a conversation with a CTO into a Google Doc that you ping back to them within half an hour, you've got it fresh in their mind. They haven't been dragged into a support escalation or something. If you just get the nod of like, yep, okay, cool, and then it's over to branding, and then all of a sudden you've written a white paper or a use case. But it's spotting those transient moments that you can go, right, I'm going to grab this. Okay, now let's get it out. And enabling founders to get leverage. Like I'm a big a champion of what you're doing, because it's easy to, if anything nowadays, it's probably easier. You can vibe code something that looks cool and would address 10 people's problems, but how does that scale? And I think we need to learn from the old world. We need to learn from those traveling salesmen or whatever, the guys who would Pound the Streets, who the CEO of Salesforce. There's an amazing podcast where he does an interview where, yeah, he was from that old world. He worked for one of the tech companies, maybe Xerox, and he had a patch in Manhattan, and he literally had a defined number of blocks. And what he did there, he built the relationships. He became the only viable option. What is it? The category of one. And he worked his customers, but he built those relationships to the point that he outsold everyone, and then he got given a region, and then a continent or whatever. But it all comes down to the basics of you know build the trust, and then try and kind of standardize it. I really want to, what's the word, collateralize it almost,
Right,
so
right,
that
right.
you can then leverage it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I think that that inflection point is so very relevant to, well, every startup, particularly tech startup. They're going to go through this. If they haven't gone through it yet, they're going to go through that inflection point where they need to leverage the founders' DNA, if you like, and scale that across an organization, because they're just not going to get there if they rely on that founder-led sales. And so that's really cool. I like the way you describe that. Kind of to wrap it a bit. What I'm trying to get to is understanding how a founder, tech founder, could, because I think that's where we're really aiming this at, is the tech founder, or perhaps someone who's been dropped into the early sales role within a startup that may not have been in there before. They might have corporate experience but in a different area, or they're pretty fresh and they're starting out in their career. And those people are going to need a mentor, and they're going to need mentors most likely, right? And I think that's the key here, is that maybe you do have a sort of suite of mentors, because mentor one may be really good at people management and understanding the EQ of the world. Another one might be good at finance. Another one might be good about thinking about tech. Another one about investment, and getting those together. Like, how do you think it's best in today's world, I guess, where you're not then surrounded in a company by loads of mentors. You are the founder and kind of top of the tree, if you like. You've got your investors, but again, your investors have a slant and a certain and a definite incentive for you to head in a certain direction, and perhaps that's definitely more advisory work rather than mentorship. And so, where are these founders going to find their mentors, and what are they looking for in those mentors?
That's a great question. I think, but obviously I don't have investors sort of behind the scenes watching my every
Yeah,
move. But I think my current feelings, and they almost disrupt my own sort of what I feel like I should say versus what I'm going to say.
mm,
It's almost like I'm really behind this concept of building in public, like almost sharing your vulnerability. So yeah, like I like to, in a one-to-one context, I guess this is the remote equivalent of us going for a coffee. I like to share a little bit of vulnerability, like break down barriers. So occasionally maybe I overshare, but it's just that, how do we build rapport quickly? So how do I build rapport, and then not afraid to make mistakes, because again, it's like, when you're in your early days, no one knows you, no one cares about you, so you can kind of screw up. And I personally, again, we could have done this entire conversation on, legendary mess ups throughout my career
yeah.
and how they formed me. And they would have formed a similar, like all good, oh, bit of a blip, all good, bit of a blip. So it's not afraid to sort of mess up in public. Obviously, that is, you've got to be careful, because, the internet never forgets. But at the same time, I think building in public, showing a little bit of vulnerability, I think that does break down barriers or open doors that, we're now in a world, like, you and I could go for a coffee off the back of my huge oversharing in this conversation,
Sure,
and
sure.
that's good.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think what you talk about there as well, the founder making fast fails and learning from those mistakes, hopefully cheap fast fails, learning from those mistakes. That's certainly how I viewed my life, is like, it's much like learning to drive. Like, you hope that you learn to drive, you get there without bumping the car too much, or when you're selling, that you don't miss out on selling too many deals, or that whatever it might be, you make those mistakes, and you learn from them fast. The challenge of the founder is their day is going to be compartmentalized into, like, telling everyone how brilliant you are and how you're going to be the next, being all positive. And you see this in public at the moment. You talk about building in public. Most of building in public is 99% of it is how great everyone's doing, how wonderful it is, and it's very much a veneer, and it's very much fairly dull and boring, if we're honest, because it doesn't give the full picture of a founder's life. And part of what we're doing here, like you were saying, is cutting through all of that and getting quite transparent and very down to earth. Founders are going to make tons of mistakes, and that's okay. Number one. Number two, they are going to have to flip on one day from maybe selling themselves in an investment area. Selling for investment is also like, we've got these gaps, we need filling it. So it's not saying we're all doing well. In the afternoon, building in public, saying, look, I'm really struggling with go to market. To be honest, I don't even understand the purpose of a CRM, and because everyone's going to tell you all these things, and you've got certain areas of expertise that you know really well, but some areas, because you've had to be really focused and hyper focused on bringing this product to life, you've ignored the last 10 years of technology in CRM or whatever it is you're doing, and being vulnerable in the afternoon, that person can come and step in and say, you know what, you need to go and talk to so and so. They were in the CRM business for 20 years. Now they're doing XYZ. Maybe they can help you out there, whatever that might be. But I guess the real tricky bit is who you share to, and how public you are, like you mentioned. And then hopefully you're doing that in an area which someone will lean in and say, hey, maybe you should go and talk to. Right, that's the tricky bit.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess where I see some potential for the GTM, and I feel like we're about to, spin up the GTM mentorship program. But if there is a trusted cohort of people who have, who are battle weary, I mean, yeah, the CRM, the amount of customers and like people I've dealt with, like CRM projects, I feel like I've used one of every CRM and one of every blinking Kanban tool on the internet, and I still revert to, Google Docs and sticky notes
Yep.
or whatever it is.
Yep.
And so sometimes all it takes is someone to just go, yeah, but does pen and paper just work? Should we give it a go for
Right.
6 months just to have a go?
Right.
And again, it's someone with the confidence and the bags under their eyes to go, honestly, like, don't overthink your CRM, for example. And yeah, as long as you're sort of hitting all the right kind of, don't overthink stuff. But yeah, I'd more than put my hat in the ring to sort of to be a pool of people who, if anyone wants to, send a message, pick up the phone or whatever, and just, I've had some great chats with people, friend, again, it's that third person. A friend has told me, hey, you're in this industry, why don't you chat to this person? And I think the lesson learned for me is, like, not every conversation leads to a revenue or a commercial based outcome, but often getting to the stage where you go, really nice to meet you, I am a complete inappropriate fit for you, so let's go our separate ways, but keep in touch. Saying no
Yes.
is so powerful, and having that
Yes.
confidence to do that,
Yeah.
that would probably be my, like, closing thought. It's having the confidence to say no, but in a safe and polite way that doesn't burn bridges.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's brilliant. So, I mean, pick up the phone. Certainly, have those conversations. Those founders need to be thinking about being, I guess, a lot more transparent and vulnerable, and move on quickly from areas that are solved. Like if they get these solved, and I think you've summarized that great, Andrew. It was really good to talk to you today, and thank you for
Awesome.
the time. And looking forward to seeing how your career develops, and appreciate all the expertise that you shared today with us. And we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks very much.
Brilliant. Cool. Thanks. Catch you soon.
Bye bye.